Hi there. Good morning, everybody, those who are in the room and those who are watching this live stream online. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this session on women entrepreneurs, the key to advancing climate solutions. My name is Sana Kapadia. I'm from 2X Global, and we're co-hosting this incredible event today with our partners. On the screen, WeFi, European Investment Bank, EBRD. And others. Great to have you here. It's the first day of COP, so there's a few snafus that we're kind of managing. Some of our speakers are making their way here as our audience members, but I wanted to get us kicked off. So for those of you who are watching online, apologies for the later start. Just a little bit of context of why this conversation matters before we get going. Our plan today is to really try and have a dialogue with you all and to really try to understand and peel back the layers of what's happening around filling and bridging the funding gap that women entrepreneurs face, particularly those who are working to address the climate crisis and are advancing climate solutions. So the idea is to hear from each of you what you're doing, the examples that you have, to talk a little bit about what's still in the way, what data we might need to bridge some of these gaps, and how we can scale up solutions. But without further ado, I'm going to welcome our keynote speaker, Thomas Ostros, Vice President at the European Investment Bank. Thomas is responsible for gender equality in EIB's lending operations, as well as the bank's internal diversity and inclusion efforts. His areas of oversight, hi Summer, welcome. All good. His areas of oversight include financing of energy, health, and life sciences. A lot more to your bio, Thomas, but I will hand over to you to maybe also introduce yourself briefly, and please do welcome you to the stage to provide some opening remarks. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Very nice to be here after a little bit of a detour that we took. So I think some of other of the participants might turn up as we go. My name is Thomas Östros. I'm Vice President of the European Investment Bank. Before that, I was minister for more than a decade in Sweden, in the Swedish government, and in a government that always had at least 50-50 when it comes to gender balance, and in a parliament that also had 50-50 basically. So I think the experience I got from that is that it is so self-evident, and it is a bit crazy that we haven't started to realize that this is how we should organize governance, economics, ambitions to see to that both sexes have equal opportunity to be represented. I then was executive director at the International Monetary Fund, a board member under the leadership of Christine Lagarde. And that was also such a wonderful experience to see how management could push an institution to realize that gender equality is also about economics and macroeconomics and the outcome of countries' economic development. And many very important and advanced studies were made on her initiative to show that in the macroeconomic figures. But now I'm Vice President of the EIB, an institution that has high ambitions, still a long way to go, but has high ambitions on this field. So on behalf of the EIB, the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, 2X Global and EBRD, I am pleased to warmly welcome you to today's interactive session that will explore the opportunities to accelerate financing for women entrepreneurs addressing climate challenges. Let me start by saying that as the climate crisis has intensified over the past decade, the potential of diversity and the power of female entrepreneurs to speed up climate action are increasingly gaining traction. But we need more investments in women entrepreneurs and women-led businesses. Because not only do investment in women often perform better financially, they also tend to deliver better climate results. Research shows that gender-diverse boards are more likely to improve energy efficiency, reduce water consumption, lower company costs, and invest in renewable power generation. EIB's own research shows that women-led firms achieve higher ESG scores, and they are more likely to start sustainability-focused businesses. Yet there is a 1.7 trillion gap in financing worldwide for formal women-owned small businesses, and more than 2/3 lack access to financial services. This is a missed market opportunity and a missed opportunity for all of us. The EIB, as you know, is the European Union's climate bank. We are the largest provider of green finance. Our climate bank roadmap explicitly recognizes that advancing social inclusion and reducing inequality is an effective way to build climate resilience and reduce carbon emissions. And advancing gender equality in its own right is essential. We see how well-designed climate solutions can help to address key global gender equality challenges such as energy access and food security. Just like many of you in the room, at the EIB we work alongside our banking and microfinance institution partners to strategically invest in women entrepreneurs who advance climate and environment solutions. Year on year, we see how this part of our portfolio is growing. A few examples. Bank of Kigali, one of our 2x qualifying clients with strong commitment to back female entrepreneurs and to advance climate action. We back female fund managers with a climate and sustainability focus, who in turn often invest in women entrepreneurs. But we also fund managers that apply a stronger gender and climate lens to their portfolios. It is great to see Leapfrog investments here. We have been working with Leapfrog for many years, and we will hear more from them later. And the collaborative spirit and joint efforts of the MDB Gender Working Group and 2X Global, as well as the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, co-hosting our event today, are truly advancing the gender lens investing field globally and catalyzing more investments in women entrepreneurs. As delighted as we are to see and hear how climate finance is scaling up, because it is, we are also fully aware that this does not always happen with a gender lens. Today's development challenges are becoming more complex, and the need for women's leadership and innovative solutions have never been greater. A deeper focus on the intersection between gender and climate action, and in particular the role of women entrepreneurs, is more essential than ever. The COP28 presidency has underlined the importance of direct access to climate financing for women and girls. My hope is that today's event will feed into the discussions and negotiations that are taking place here in Dubai over the next 2 weeks, setting the scene for how to accelerate financing for women entrepreneurs addressing climate challenges. Thank you and very welcome to this event.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Really appreciate you setting the context, and we'll be digging into some of those threads over the course of this conversation. I'd now like to invite up Wendy Telecki, head of WeFi, to also share some opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Those of you in the room and also on the live stream. Really delighted to be here on this first full day at COP, and looking forward to this being the beginning of a dialogue that will go on for the rest of the week. We have a lot of events happening with different partners, which demonstrates the importance that's now being shown to how we can support women addressing climate challenges. So I wanted to thank Thomas for your statements and for hosting us here at the MDB Pavilion, and also to our co-organizers 2X and EBRD. It's been great pulling this together with all of you. WeFi, the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, is a partnership amongst many of the multilateral development banks and several donor agencies. About 14 countries have contributed to WeFi. And we're now in our 5th year of supporting women entrepreneurs around the world, operating in about 67 countries. And we've been able to get funding out to support women entrepreneurs to the tune of about $3.6 billion through our partners and the work that they're doing with banks and other venture capitalists. So we're making strides in supporting women entrepreneurs around the world through the ecosystem work that we do. And what we see is more and more the women entrepreneurs that we're supporting are involved in climate areas. So they're working on the circular economy. They're working in food systems and agriculture. They're working in areas that are going to make big differences for women in the climate in their community and around the world. But they face many, many challenges, and we're here today to really talk about the challenges and how we as a community can help overcome those challenges. We know we need to do more to help them. Only 0.01% of ODA funding is going to support activities that are both climate and gender related. And only about 6% of venture capital is going to support women founders in climate tech. So the numbers are still staggeringly low, and we have a long way to go, not just to increase the amounts, but also to increase the ability of women to really compete in these areas. WeFi recognizes that the work we've done is just the beginning, and so this week we're going to be talking about scaling up our work in climate. And we're excited on Gender Day on the 4th to have a number of announcements on the work that we're going to be doing going forward. But most importantly here at COP, we're trying to do consultations to learn what are the solutions to not only see what's happening in our own portfolios across the MDBs that we work with, but what else is out there and who's doing innovative work that we can learn from. So as I said, this is the beginning of what we consider our consultations around COP to learn and to grow and to find the solutions that will help us scale up our work. And we're really looking forward to the conversation today to start digging into those questions. So thank you all for being here, and look forward to hearing from everybody.
Thank you, Wendy. Fantastic. And because we're a small enough room here, we're going to be engaging all of you in the conversation too. And Wendy would love you to speak more about some of the other initiatives under WeFi. We now have our full panel. Knuckle, may I invite you up on stage as well? There's a seat right there. Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to have a brief discussion with our panelists here up on stage to surface some of the initiatives and facilities, etc., that they have in place that are targeted towards supporting women entrepreneurs, particularly those focused on climate solutions. And I'm going to briefly introduce our panel, and then I have an opening question for each of them that will hopefully surface for you how their institution is applying a gender lens in their work. But just to go down the line here, and Knuckle, thank you for making it. I know you had to sprint across all the every space, and some are you too.
Same, yeah.
So the challenge number one is how do you get to the venue? You made it, thank you. So right next to me, I have Moa Westman of the European Investment Bank. Grateful to have you here, Moa. Then we have Samar Esmat, Senior Operations Officer for Gender and Economic Inclusion at IFC. Barbara Rambusik, Director of Gender and Economic Inclusion at EBRD. And then Knuckles, a very partner and co-head of the Climate Investment Strategy at Leapfrog Investments. So quite a diverse range of speakers here, and they'll be surfacing some of the challenges as well as solutions that are out there. So my opening question to each of you, and please do share a little bit more about your backgrounds as you come on, and maybe actually, Samar, I'll start with you to get us kicked off with your intro. It would be great for you to share how the IFC is supporting women entrepreneurs. More so, actually, take a step back and walk us through how, what IFC's gender strategy more broadly for investments looks like. But go ahead with your intro first.
Absolutely, and it's lovely to see faces of old friends, and it really feels like a very intimate community. So, I mean, just in terms of IFC's gender strategy, it's very timely that you asked me about that, because we're in the process of updating the World Bank Group gender strategy, which had been in place for 8 years and is now being up for update. And of course, climate features much more strongly than it did maybe 10 years ago. I mean, the gender strategy for the World Bank Group, of which, of course, the IFC strategy on gender cascades has several focus areas, but the one important pivot or difference between where we were 10 years ago and where we are now, we're looking at gender inclusion, or we're looking at inclusion in a much more broader term. That's one. We're looking at much more ambition and scale because of the urgency, I think, and the exacerbated crises that we're facing. And then last but not least, we're seeing more emphasis on climate than what we saw in our strategy maybe a decade ago. I'd say that gender equality and inclusion is at the center and core of IFC's corporate strategies. It's also part of our business delivery model. We have a dedicated department that's fully resourced to deliver on it. So that's the overall higher level vision and thinking on the IFC side. But happy to go into more detail if you want.
Fantastic, Summer. Thank you for getting us kicked off. Maybe Barbara coming to you next with the same question.
So thank you very much for having me here. I think it's fantastic to have this event here and really draw a sort of spotlight on the importance of integrating gender into climate finance. So at EBRD, we have 3 key strategic priorities at a corporate level. One is green finance and investments, one is equality of opportunity and gender, and the third one is digitalization. And of course, the 3 are closely interlinked, and particularly this nexus between gender equality and climate finance and climate policy engagement is at the core of what we do. So over the past 10 years, we've invested already 1 billion euros into our Women in Business program. So that's financing that directly goes to women entrepreneurs. But also, and that's the important thing, we try to move the market. We try to show that women entrepreneurs are good business. And we try to teach banks how to tap into that market, how to structure their products and their services so that they can actually provide something that is useful for that market. And by doing that, we actually turn the market, and it goes beyond our financing, but we really show that it's worth investing in women, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing. There's the business case. So this is very much our approach, in a way, trying to, through our investments and policy engagement, to make the business case and move the market into recognizing women, as we heard from our keynote speaker as well, as viable business actors.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for getting us kicked off. And yes, a key message, gender smart investing is smart. And we'll dig into that, Mo. Mo, I might come to you next to also share a little bit about EIB's work and following the opening remarks too.
Great, thank you so much, Sana, and thanks for having me here. Yeah, like you have heard already from Vice President Östros, we have our Climate Bank Roadmap strategy, which is also a strategy for environmental sustainability, where we really look at gender as an integral part to our work on climate action and environmental sustainability. But for many years, we have also had our gender strategy in place, and increasingly we are focusing on the climate and environmental nexus also in that. But more broadly in the gender space, we really look at how do we uphold the rights of women and girls across all the investments that we do, especially since we are investing a lot in infrastructure projects. We also look at how do we enhance the positive impact on gender equality through all different types of investments, whether it's in the health sector, in transport, in energy, or across the board. How do we do that better, and how do we design for gender smart solutions? And then the third impact area is really on the invest part. How do we invest in women entrepreneurs, in businesses that are led or owned or founded by women? And we do so, as many others here in the room, through our partners, so that we work with local banks and private equity funds to put in place dedicated credit lines to really reach women entrepreneurs. And that's where we have also had a real help in the use of the 2X criteria to really integrate that and set a framework for what do we mean with a women entrepreneur and women businesses, and helped us to reach it. And like Barbara, we also support clients in their way to get there. So the technical assistance piece showing, how do you reach the female market, why it is a market opportunity, has been hugely important for us to convince those clients that are not really there yet, but then at the same time also provide support to women entrepreneurs to be able to access that financing and become bankable. I'll stop there for now and happy to continue later.
Thank you so much, Moa. So maybe speaking of some of those investments, I'm going to head now to Knuckle to introduce a little bit about, I mean, as a leading impact fund in this space, how did Leapfrog find its way towards gender smart investing, and what does that look like in practice for you?
Thank you, Sana. It's a pleasure to be here. Very few panels nowadays have a skewed gender ratio, and it's fascinating that this is one of them. So at Leapfrog, we are a global impact investor. We invest across emerging markets, specifically in Africa and Asia, financial services, healthcare, and climate solutions. I'm a partner, and I globally co-lead the climate solutions play. I'm going to reverse what you said about gender-based, gender-smart investing is good. I'm saying smart investing is gender-balanced, or should be gender-balanced. And for us at Leapfrog, it not only is driven top-down, but it's also bottom-up. And let me give you a couple of examples. I think 47% of our employees are women, and including 38% of them in our leadership board. So we are trying to accelerate this as much as we can. The other thing that we realized is what we don't want to do is compromise competency for gender balance. And it's very easy to say that, which means that we try and see less lateral hiring, but more bottom-up hiring. So how do we increase and provide skill sets so that gender balance can actually evolve through the organization rather than just going out and finding someone who's already got that opportunity. And then it comes to our portfolio investing. How do we work with our companies? So we don't look for companies run based on gender, but we make sure that we engage with companies to increase gender balance aggressively. And that, again, it's a dual approach. We work and increase that on their boards. We make sure that gender balance is understood well. And as all of you know this fairly well, there are cultural nuances to it, which need to be addressed. It's not all black and white on the other side, and therefore we work very deeply with companies to say that why we need them and why there is an economic benefit to having gender balance in play. At our board, we have aggressive discussions on are we looking to increase the gender balance. And one of the quotes that one of our board members gave us is, your values are not values unless it costs you. And therefore, we should be okay for it to cost us because we are on this gender balance journey. We are obviously signatories to 2X for IFC. So, we get questioned a lot. And I remember we were doing a senior level hiring recently. And we have to every quarter demonstrate to our board why we are or we are not finding this. And smaller aspects including women interviewing women. It's not a male-led thing. Smaller aspects about why we need to ask the right kind of questions when we're trying to do gender balancing. And also skilling ourselves as we go in the journey. We don't expect to know everything. There are biases already inherent to us. And therefore, we want to be open and be questioned as well. So we want to take that thought leadership position.
Thank you, Knuckle. I really appreciate you starting to speak about what gender-smart practices look like in practice and on the ground, and what it means to sustain it throughout the investment cycle, not just at screening, but actually portfolio support, etc. And we'll get more into that. I might come back to you, Barbara, actually, to give us an example of a facility or a fund or an initiative that EBRD has supported. And now let's start to get a bit deeper into something that's more climate-focused with also women entrepreneurs.
Thanks a lot, Sana. So at EBRD, we are really integrating gender into our climate finance across a broad range of sectors, from our renewable frameworks to our green cities programs, but also in terms of how we engage with financial institutions, partner banks, in terms of credit lines. So we have our green economy financing facilities in many countries now, particularly in Central Asia. And here, the idea is that we lend to partner banks who then on-lend to SMEs to invest in green technology. And we also provide advisory services for those SMEs to understand which kind of technologies work best for their specific sector, for their specific business. And now we have been targeting women entrepreneurs specifically because we do know that they are very interested in climate finance, but they very often lack the capacity, the knowledge, the understanding to know which technologies work best for them. And so it's providing that sort of guidance and that support initially, but then also enabling them to access the finance as a second step. That really opens up opportunities for them. So we have been doing that across many countries in Central Asia and opening up access to advisory services, but also to finance for over 4,000 women already. So this has become a key area of work for us. In addition, we also look at policy reforms, and here we are working very closely also with the Women's Entrepreneurship Finance Initiative to better understand what are the regulatory challenges that women may face when they want to set up and grow their businesses or get the right skills, access networks, and how can we work with regulators, with central banks to first understand where those challenges are. And we can talk a bit more about the We Finance Code that is so important in this context. But then also to tackle those and to introduce gender lens policies that really open up the market for women to invest, to grow their businesses, particularly in the green sectors, which are, as we know, growing sectors and so important for the economy and for the world overall.
Thank you, Barbara. Really helpful to get those examples of how you're stewarding both the capital and the non-capital support that's required. Summer, I might come to you next. Can you also share an example of some programs that IFC is spearheading? And Knuckle gave us a prompt around the regional context. Maybe share a little bit of flavor on that too.
Sure. So I would say that historically, IFC's flagship initiative around supporting and financing female entrepreneurs is our so-called Banking on Women's program, very similar to your program, very much benefiting from WeFi. And here we're, first and foremost supporting female-led SMEs. More recently, we've looked at a different space that female entrepreneurs occupy that is not very much serviced by our Banking on Women program, because there the financing instruments are typically debt finance, and the financing institutions would be banks. We looked at female-led tech-powered startups as an area that is very promising and which harvests a lot of economic potential that's yet to be unleashed. And so 2 years ago, we launched a flagship program called She Wins Arabia that aimed to support over 150 female-led tech-powered startups from across the Arab region and to connect them and position them better in the startup ecosystem. And the idea was to say we don't want to only work with the female startups, but we also want to work with the ecosystem players to level the playing field and to make sure that once we exit, the ecosystem is capacitated, aware and capacitated, doesn't overlook female-led startups and supports them and finances them. And now the third, I would say, wave, so to say, in our thinking around supporting female entrepreneurship is how do you then apply a climate lens to all of that? And so what we did was our starting point was to say, let's try and understand the female climate entrepreneurship space a little bit. And so we're just about to launch a paper that's looking exactly at that. And what our paper found was, and by the way, the research in that space is very limited. We know very little about female climate entrepreneurship, where they are, what they do, how their challenges may be different from non-climate focused entrepreneurs. But what we found was that there were two categories of female climate entrepreneurs. They're the ones that would be typically serviced by the Banking on Women program, which are brick and mortar, SMEs, maybe microfinance, and they're facing the reality of what climate change is doing to their business, and they're trying to adapt to it. And so their premise is to green their business. So that's one category. And that's a category that needs to be served, because what's the challenge for them is the access to the green technologies that's going to help them green their business, and it's access to the capital required to do that. And so that's a whole set of challenges, and it's exacerbated for women compared to men because the gap to access all of that already was existing. So that's a space that I think we're going to be looking at, how to help women green their businesses, SMEs. But the other space, and that's the one I'm very passionate about, is the work around tech-powered female startups that are going to provide the climate innovations. And why do I find that very inspiring and interesting? It's because women, by way of living their lives and going about their lives, are experiencing climate change in a very different way from men. And therefore, they might be closer to solutions that will solve for climate issues relating to women. And so we're very interested in that brainpower. We want to harvest that brainpower and get those female climate solution, tech-powered, innovative startup founders closer to us, work with the ecosystem and help finance them. So I would say that the next iteration of Shiwan's Arabia would be, how do you apply a climate lens to that? I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Summer. And I appreciate that sort of distinction in a way, right? Those who are responding to the impacts of the climate crisis and those who are leading with climate and are also gender smart.
And creating solutions.
And creating solutions.
And the technology.
And that's the thing. I think part of this shifting of the narrative, right? There's a lot of research about the disproportionate burden and impact that women face and marginalized communities face from climate change, but they're also at the forefront of solutions as innovators, as fund managers, and we're going to hear from a few in a moment. But maybe, Nakul, coming to you, would you like to share an example from your portfolio of some of these high growth, particularly given the type of investment that you provide, of some climate entrepreneurs in your portfolio?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just want to take a step back and the way we look at applying the climate lens is a little different. For us, climate touches everything, right? It's not a segment, not a category, it's not a technology. It's essentially going to motivate a transition by societies in ways we haven't experienced before. It's going to make us think about how we generate our energy, how we consume our food, how we move around, how we build our cities. And therefore, taking a cue from what you just said, is women will get even more impacted, right? Because they still need to move to the next stage. So that is number one. Number two, they're closer to solutions. Some of the largest environmental movements in history have been supported by women. And so some of those things, their participation in global decision-making is important for us. And therefore, when it percolates to solutions or products and services by companies and where we invest in, is essentially around the way emerging consumers are coming through. And therefore, a large part of the emerging consumers are going to be women. And for us, it becomes very, very critical to build that. How do we make sure we invest in businesses that provide faster, cheaper, better access to energy, financial solutions, ability to move around, because transport incrementally is going to be at the heart of moving into prosperity, into middle class. And our thesis is essentially built around emerging markets. And the way we apply the climate lens is we want to enable a green leap for the emerging consumers. What that means is that if there is one factor that is non-negotiable for emerging consumers, is affordability, right? They only have one chance to buy a product or a service or a solution. They can't afford to make a mistake. And therefore, for decades, transition to a low-carbon future had a green premium. It was expensive for us to transition. What we're seeing now for the last kind of decade moving into is this green premium is transitioning into a green discount. And the moment you have green discount, it means that it's affordable, it's scalable. And therefore now, women entrepreneurs can actually participate in creating products and services. It doesn't have to be a climate product because, as I said, climate will touch everything. They'll have to embed sustainability, they'll have to embed climate into it. We've invested across financial services to increase access of financing for women to start businesses. One of our companies is Sun King in Africa, which does pay-as-you-go solutions for solar home products, specifically around energy needs for women who haven't done this before. We're looking at mobility solutions in India. We are looking at smart farming solutions in Southeast Asia. And we are seeing increasing role of either women entrepreneurs, but more women consumers. And that's kind of an interesting balance to see.
And thank you, Nakul. I think what you were touching upon there is also the opportunity and the long-term value creation possibility as investors. I'm going to come to each of you with one more question, and then I want to open up to the audience. And maybe, Moa, starting with you, if you can share, because as the leading climate bank, your EIB has lots of amazing case studies and examples of what this looks like in practice across different sectors. Maybe can you pick one or two to really bring to light how EIB is advancing its climate and gender finance agenda?
Sure, thank you, Sana. I think also it's interesting what we're all coming to in this discussion is that climate and gender are not competing or separate targets. It's really something that we should bring together and that we are bringing together. And that's what we have been trying to do at the EIB, not only in our strategies, but now also in our investments. So what we are seeing again is we look at where are, as you were talking about, what are the businesses really being impacted by climate change. So for example, in Malawi, we are working with EcoBank and First Capital Bank Malawi to bring together the agriculture credit lines that we have with a gender component. We know that women are really highly represented in agriculture, but for example, only access 77% of agriculture finance. So in these dedicated thematic credit lines, we look at sustainable agriculture businesses that are headed by women. And what we are finding when we finance these women-led SMEs in agriculture in Malawi is that they also work with smallholder farmers and women cooperatives to feed into their supply chain. So there we also have a multiplier effect, and they can also support those smallholders to employ more sustainable practices. Likewise, in Tanzania, for example, where the blue economy is really, really important, we are combining our blue economy credit lines with a gender focus. And there we have three partner banks, NMB, CRDB, and KCB, that are just launching this more dedicated approach on women and in the blue economy. But I have a concrete example that I really like from Blue Orchard, one of our fund clients. They are partnering with microfinance institutions to combine microfinance loan with climate risk insurance. So this really reaches then women micro-entrepreneurs and women on the ground that tend to bear the brunt of climate change burdens and are really sensitive to when you have a crop loss because weather patterns are changing. So having access then to a climate risk insurance that can cover your losses that year when that happens is really powerful. And starting to see more and more of these examples coming through and being able to fund them is also really inspiring, even though we have a very long way to go, as Vice President Östros also referred to in the beginning of the session.
Thank you so much, Moa. Just looking at time, I think I want to bring in some of the voices from the room as well. And Wendy, I know we started talking about the We Finance Code before, and something that was touched upon here as well is the role of tools, institutional mechanisms, the power of collaboration. So maybe do you want to share with us a little bit about how the We Finance Code has been built and how it's looking to mobilize and galvanize more action? And I'm going to hand you the mic.
Sure, thank you. So the We Finance Code is an initiative that we launched just about a month ago to bring together banks, regulators, and other financial infrastructure players in countries around the world to commit to doing more to support women entrepreneurs. And there's three components to it. One is to identify stronger leadership in the financial institutions and financial sector to advocate for women entrepreneurs. The second is to improve data, and I know there's a big conference here looking at data. It's critically important in all sectors, but in the financial sector, there's an incredible lack of data on how much financing is going to women-led SMEs. And then to catalyze additional action, including lending, equity, training, capacity building for women entrepreneurs. We had our first launch of the code in Dominican Republic a few weeks ago. Indonesia will launch next Monday, on Monday. The Netherlands will be launching a code the following week, and we have about 30 countries lined up to launch codes in the next few months. So by International Women's Day, we hope most of them will have launched. The important thing here for the climate is that a lot of the work that we need to do with these financial institutions is to improve the data both on gender and climate. And we have seen initiatives to do, for example, social bonds. And one of the nice things about these bonds is that they require financial institutions to improve data. And often they have had goals of reaching both women and climate. And so we see banks thinking about these things in the same instruments. And we also do a lot of performance incentives on credit lines or equity programs that we have, where we're providing incentives to financial institutions if they reach certain targets for women-led enterprises. And many of those targets also have climate goals. So the code kind of helps bring together the broader financial sector around these elements and get a lot more focus and leadership on this issue.
So much, Wendy, and actually Carrie Bojanin from the Rallying Cry, I'm going to come to you next because of what the work you're doing on the African continent to support women entrepreneurs and particularly climate entrepreneurs.
Much, Sana. Hi, everyone. As Sana mentioned, my name is Carrie Bojanin, and I am based in Dubai. And I still got lost coming here this morning, so insider knowledge doesn't mean anything in terms of local knowledge. As Sana mentioned, the Rallying Cry is an initiative to catalyze private sector investment and capital flows at the intersection of gender and climate. And we are starting in Africa, and we do a lot in ag. And I thought that the point that I heard about the scale and ambition, given the sense of urgency, is super important. But also, Moa, I loved the example that you raised, because I was also going to bring the same, which is to say that women are indeed the first movers and the earlier adapters of climate responsiveness and responses that we're seeing on the very front lines of climate change. And they are indeed the ones who are most impacted, but also have the least amount of capital or access to capital. What I think is so exciting about working with capital and connecting women to capital in these spaces is that they are not just trying to become a unicorn or, drive a new tech solution and do an IPO or any of that. These women see a problem that affects them and their lives, and they step in and they fix it. And it turns out they're fixing it for 50 women, 100 women, 1,000 women. And so when you see these women working with cooperatives or smallholder farmers or taking along thousands of women with them, I think that's where we get the scale and the ambition and the multiplier effect. And I think that is where we need to see more of this innovative finance and thinking about that. So I love this idea around working at the ecosystem level, because I think that's where we're going to see more transformational shifts at scale to meet the urgency of the problem. So I just wanted to I hate saying this, but double click on that point.
I'd love to hear from some more voices on the floor, and then actually our plan is to get you to speak to each other a little bit. I also want to just thank our panelists, because we've kept the hope and optimism really high, and they've pointed out some amazing solutions, but we also know that there are challenges, and we will take a moment to talk about those. But anybody from the room maybe wants to add what they're doing at this intersection?
Good morning. My name's Jacqueline McGlade. I was formerly the UN Chief Scientist, but I'm also on the EBRD Advisory for Environment. But I actually want to talk about Africa. I come out of Kenya, I live there, and I work out of Strathmore University. And I want to pick up the point about data. So one of the things that we're fortunate we have some funding from IKEA Foundation is to really ask the basic question about what is prosperity amongst women's groups. So we have a really enormous geographic area that we're looking at, and it's precisely for climate and for entrepreneurship and looking for that financing. But now we're talking about the MSMEs, the really, really, really small little bits. And you're absolutely right. We've found again and again, with a small amount of training and connectivity, women come together much more easily to look at those solutions and to scale them. But what we find again and again and again is that you know, we have M-Pesa in Kenya, and actually Fuliza, you know, the borrowing facility on your phone, tends to be the first place that most of the women go to get that money, to get them started, because we're talking about small amounts of money. So there is a tiny facility, but once they scale, it gets to be very difficult. So what we're doing is we're trying to collect data over the next 2 years that will tell us what essentially is driving people towards increasing their prosperity. And it's very interesting. 3 major things seem to come out. We run workshops, and we have about 200,000 women in this endeavor. It's like it's called the Future of Work and Prosperity. And there's one which is the power of voice. Again and again, women keep saying, we really appreciate being given an opportunity to have our voices heard. That's number one. But number 2 is, it isn't so much the amount of money in the bank, it's the ability to go to a facility, an institution, and have the conversation and have what they want to do understood. So what I see now, more and more, is that there's a lack of knowledge right at that interface between whether it's the bank, the local bank, or whatever, the SACCO, whatever you call it, and what we're trying to do. And what these ladies generally are trying to do is create a fantastic pipeline of climate carbon projects which will give them employment for the next 25 years. Mm-hmm. And actually, it seems that there's less need for education on the ladies' side than there is on the bankers' side. So if I have one plea, it's let us collect data that's not maybe standard, it's not GDP orientated, it's prosperity orientated. But secondly, can we have a training program for local bankers so they actually can understand and be welcoming for these kinds of slightly oddball projects, but which are driven by solutions, not necessarily by a business plan that's, you know, all pucker and everything there. Thank you.
We do that already, right? We do that, yeah.
Thank you so much. And what I appreciated there was also you starting to speak about what is the change that we're trying to measure? What's the impact on the ground? Bringing up things like voice, agency, decision making. That's what true resilience really looks like, right? That's the North Star. I'd love to hear from some more voices in the room. Would you like to share what you're doing at the intersection of gender and climate? If your initiative is supporting women entrepreneurs that are forging climate solutions forward, does anybody want to jump in? Anything to add? Anything to add from our panelists as well? Maybe give that a thought while I give the room a moment to think.
Well, I'm happy to come in.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I think the point that we heard about capacity building is absolutely critical, and it's not just about the women and building their capacity to access finance and have the technical skills and all these things. It's about building the capacity of the broader ecosystem. I talked earlier about the banks. They need to know what to do. And here we have done some research with our colleagues from our Office of the Chief Economist, and they actually looked at what are the skills that loan officers need. You know, where does the sort of gender bias start at that point? And interesting, what they found is it was less the gender of the loan officer, it was more the level of experience. So the more the experience they have, the better they're able to understand a business proposal that is coming to them and be less biased. So these sort of things then help banks to also shape how they train, how they recruit, how they deploy their staff. So that's one important thing. The other, of course, and this is linking to what Wendy said earlier on, is about building the capacity within the broader system through data. But then it's not just about having the data, it's knowing what to do with the data, using the data so you actually shape evidence-based policy solutions. And so this is where we're working with the central banks, with the regulators, to put the systems in place to get the data, but then, very importantly, to build the capacity to actually change things and shape different policy solutions. So I think it has to happen on all different levels.
Thank you so much.
Can I just add to Barbara's point in response to the question that came from Kenya? Just to share that we have a few partner banks in Kenya. Access Bank is one of them. And we've worked extensively on building up their awareness and capacity to on-lend to female entrepreneurs. So I'd love to connect you with the team on the ground. Yes, yes.
Fantastic. I see a hand raised at the back. Summer, I'm coming to you at the mic.
Hi, it's good to see some familiar faces here. And my name is Samar Al-Shurafa. I'm a social entrepreneur. I have a startup called She is Arab. And I'm glad I finally made it. By the way, I attended part of the session online, so thank you for the live streaming, but I had to save my battery, but I'm glad I made it. I just want to say that I attended the very first part of the discussion, and I really believe that we need to work on innovative financing solutions. Myself as a social entrepreneur, have been really struggling to find the right financing partner, let's put it this way. When it comes to, yes, being in the Arab world, the regulatory framework is not there yet to support me as a social entrepreneur. It's still work in progress, it's quite nascent. But when I'm also looking for funding, I'm in a gray area. I'm not an NGO, and I'm not a private sector company. Venture capitalists are not interested in helping me out. Grants are mainly given to the nonprofits. So I'm somewhere in between. I've thought one too many times about closing down my business and maybe stopping what I'm doing. And then something inside me keeps telling me, no, you gotta keep going. What you're doing is important. The advocacy work is very important. So I think we need to get a little bit more creative about supporting social entrepreneurs and making it way more accessible. I'm an IFC alumni, by the way, so I have worked for IFC before. I'm familiar with how difficult it is to, register as a partner or as a service provider or whatever. But I really think we should rethink the structure and make it a lot more accessible and inclusive. Thank you.
All right, at this stage, we were hoping to get people to kind of crowd together, which would still be nice to do. And if you've come here with a buddy, maybe move your seat. And I'd love it if we can kind of be in groups of 5. I kind of see about 15 people in the room here. So if you like, stick in your little pod. And so maybe like this group of 5 here, and then we can have this kind of group of 4. And then if you want to join the ladies here, we have a group of 5 as well. And the idea is just to have a bit of a conversation in a smaller group. Summer, thank you for bringing up some of those real challenges in terms of the type of capital, the access, the gates that are up as well. So the idea is just spend, I'm going to give you guys maybe about 10 minutes to have a smaller group dialogue surfacing some of the challenges that you're experiencing in your day-to-day and in the context that you wear. And what's really, we've talked about how to advance climate solutions and how to support women entrepreneurs, but what are some of the challenges? So let's start there. Group of 5 here, group of 4 there. They can join the groups, they just have to put their mics down.
Will we return to the panel?
You will return just for some final comments.
Okay,
yes.
I don't know how to put it back on.
Listen, are we?
Es Britte, außerdem jobmäßig was.
All
Ja, ja,
right,
klar.
everybody, I'm going to ask
Und
you to
deine Kids?
slowly start to pull out of your conversations. You can stay in your circles if that's more comfortable. For those online, I'm hoping you're also in some kind of circle with the people around you, speaking to each other. So, all right, we have 3 little pods, and maybe I will ask a volunteer from each pod to share what surfaced. Was there anything that really stood out to the group? Did you coalesce on any one specific or 2 specific challenges? Maybe I will start with the group on the left. Anybody feel who from your group would like to share? Not to put anyone on the spot. And here.
But here's the microphone. Thank you so much. My name is Jacqueline Brold, and I work with the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think we had a really good and lively conversation in this group. And I guess the bottom line was, in a way, a little bit depressing that we still see a lot of challenges on the sort of internal normative side when it comes to actually shifting institutions and how that actually influences how finance moves to women. And that before we actually make that sort of fundamental change within the institutions, it will be hard also to really make other investment shifts. Others want to supplement? No? Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Maybe coming to this little pod, it looks like you've missed someone from the group, but I'll hand over.
Would you like to? No, it's okay. We got some interesting advice. Actually, Nakul joined us from the panel, and he was suggesting that perhaps social entrepreneurs should consider removing the word social and go with entrepreneurs only, and maybe, you know, reposition the business from. So I guess it's could be a marketing tip. You know, continue doing what you're doing, but position yourself as being, you know, a profitable business, etc. Still with purpose, but profitable. So I take it, and I'll look into it, I guess. Thank you for that. We also heard about the World Bank Group's initiatives looking into, you know, how to avail more financing for climate tech and gender-focused enterprises or initiatives. So I don't think they've gotten anywhere yet, but but it's work in progress.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
And then from this pod, who would like to share back? Oh, okay.
So we had a great mixture, EBRD from Madagascar, sort of investment in the cracks in between, from Canada, promoting Canadian women entrepreneurs out there in the world, and from Japan, more from the government side. I think what we found, we sort of each expressed different challenges, but I think one of the challenges that emerged at the end was it's that investment at the mid-size, the $50,000 to $100,000, that seems to be the bit that escapes and eludes a lot of women. I experience it because women think that they're not worthy of a loan of that size. In other words, oh, that's way too much. But actually, that is what they need to get their ideas up and going. And then on the other side, the facility at that size, rather, it's not microloans, it's actually something bigger than that to get the entrepreneurial activity going on the ground. So I think that was it. Anything else from anyone else? No. It was great. It was a nice group. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm glad that we had some vibrant discussions and also started to get a little bit deeper into those challenges. And I really appreciate the naming of the structures that are in place. And this came up earlier in the conversation too, in terms of, you know, fix the capital, not the women, because they actually know what they're doing to advance the solutions, and how do we build the capacity of the investment officers and deal with some of those more structural biases that are in place. Also, on this side of the room, the aspect on what does it really mean to advance fit-for-purpose capital. It's not, you need all the flavors, all the different stripes of it. It needs to be contextualized. And I know Carrie with the Rallying Cry is doing some really interesting work at that climate and gender nexus to make sure that the solutions being provided meet the needs of the women on the ground. And this aspect that came up earlier in the conversation too about how do we really steward the leadership and the resilience to keep at this work, and Summer, you brought that up too. So maybe before some closing remarks, I'll come to each of our panelists here to share, what is one thing you hope that people take as they leave this room? It's technically the first day of all the festivities for the next 2 weeks. What's the one thing you want them to remember as they walk into the other rooms and spaces that they're going to be in, to activate their gender and climate strategies? So maybe, Knuckle, I'll start with you.
It seems that I am one of the few positive people here. And people have accused me of peddling optimism. I think this is happening. It's going to happen faster in this next stage than obviously it has happened in the past. Just to kind of give you an analogy here, if you look at the risks of climate or the impact of climate risks, they are as conclusive to what smoking is to lung cancer. What I mean is, at an individual level, it's very difficult to change, right? And it's very difficult to try and comprehend, the impacts of long-term changing at a structural level. And that's what's happening right now, and it's needed. But what I'm seeing is that the movement has started without, and it's binary in nature, which means that, again, to draw an analogy, we work with IFC and EIB, and, they are our investors, and they ask us about gender, they ask us about ESG, they ask us about so many other compliances, and we push it down. We push it down to our portfolio companies. And we've seen that consistency changing the way companies think. And they push it down to their vendors. And we've seen this change. So obviously, it has taken time. And similar with gender, this is happening. But it's also interesting that it'll happen because the sheer amount of skill sets that reside for the new world around climate, around understanding, also reside within the other side of the gender. And that's why it's quite exciting. So I'm relatively less worried that but I'm worried about when.
Thank you, Knuckle, and appreciate the optimism is much needed. Let's all carry that optimism and hope with us as we walk around this beautiful space. And you're bringing up the importance there again of the measurement, the targets, and the role that plays in accountability as well. Thank you. Barbara, coming to you next.
Thank you very much. So I think there is ground for optimism. I think if we look at climate change, though, we all have to be realistic that this is a huge, huge challenge. But the optimism comes from the fact that if we want to tackle this challenge, we need to empower everyone to participate in that. And we need to recognize women as catalysts of making that change happen. And if we don't give them the voice and the power and the finance and the capacity and the access to the green skills and jobs and all these things, then we are going to miss our global targets, and we are going not be able to really tackle climate change together. So I think gender and equality and climate change are, I would say, two sides of the same coin. They need to go together, because if we don't do the one, we can't achieve the other. And I think that, for me, is the key message for today.
Well said. Thank you so much, Barbara. Summer, coming to you.
Yes, I mean, I'm building on what you said, and I think when I think about the entrepreneurship or climate entrepreneurship agenda, my sense of hope and optimism comes from, I think it takes on the one hand, motivation, vision, drive, passion to get there. And then on the flip side, or the other part of it is the resources and the systems and the capital and all of that. I think the resources and the systems and the capital, we're working on that. But where I derive my hope from is the motivation and the vision and the passion that I've seen in the entrepreneurship space, especially the female entrepreneurship space. And I say that not just in an abstract way. I say that because a month ago when you were there, Sana, we had our final pitch competition of the finalist of this She Wins Arabia initiative, where we had the best female startups pitching their business models to a jury of investors. And some of them were climate entrepreneurs. And their vision and their passion and their motivation about their business ideas that are essentially climate solutions really, really moved me. And I think I derive my hope from there, from that motivation, passion, and vision that sits in that space. And we have to harvest it, I think.
Thank you, Summer, and thank you for bringing those voices of innovation and hope into this room and space as well. Moa?
Yeah, I'm going to just start by building on that, really, I mean, harvesting those initiatives that are there locally. You have seen it in the regions where you work, and we see the same in the other regions that we work in. We had several pitch nights in the summer in Malawi and Southern Africa on sustainable agribusinesses for women entrepreneurs to have that platform to speak. So let's create those platforms to also educate the financial institutions, as Jackie was pointing out earlier. But I think the key message for me, which has come through a lot, is, I mean, climate action and gender equality is not competing, but reinforcing targets. And then we have also this question about how to scale it. And we can scale a lot of what we've been talking about today, mostly with a focus on emerging market. But for me at the European Investment Bank, we also invest in the EU and in developed markets. And there I see we can do much more to bring the gender and climate nexus together, especially in the women entrepreneurship space. There is a lot to do also in the developed market. So another maybe call of action, whoever is investing or is working within developed market, to also bring the gender and climate nexus to those spaces if you haven't already done so. And that's certainly going to be our priority for next year.
Thank you so much, Moa. A round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much. Wendy, may I call upon you maybe for some of your final reflections to help us close out? Thank you.
Thank you all for this rich, really, really rich discussion. And as I said, we're spending this week trying to learn and think about how we can do better and how we can scale up our work on climate. And I have I would say 6 key takeaways from this panel that I'll bring into our work as we go forward with our new efforts related to climate that we'll be announcing on Monday. So first, I think, Samara, I'm dying to see the paper that you mentioned. And I think for me, this framework that you've provided is really instructional about the women who need to green their businesses and the women who are going to green the world, basically. The women who are going to be the drivers and the tech solution providers versus the women entrepreneurs who are going to have to find ways to build more resilience and more green businesses. And we work, with the debt providers and the equity providers, and they kind of go into those different buckets. So that's, I think, a really great framing for us. I'm also hearing the story about the different size of loans. It's this missing middle that's really challenging, and also the missing link for social entrepreneurs or these businesses that are really purpose-driven, and how do we ensure women who are in purpose-driven businesses are really going to be able to get the financing that they need. Really important points that came out of my group about the institutional norms and needing to double down on getting our partners to really understand, their own businesses, the way they work themselves. Because that reflects on their clients. And if they're not able to talk to women as clients and respect them and hear their voices, then we're not going to get as far as we need to go. And then Carrie was talking about, I think, something that came through a lot, women as catalysts and the ripple effects of working with women. And in climate, that's what we need to get scale. And when you see women working in cooperatives, or they're working as aggregators, they're working on technologies that are going to scale, that's a really important element. And then finally, it comes back to data and the importance of data and measurement to make sure that we know where we're going, we know where we are, and that we can continue to move forward with real evidence of what's working and what's not working. So those are my takeaways. We'll be drawing that into our programming going forward, and thanks a lot for the opportunity to sum up.
Thank you so much, Wendy. All right, a round of applause for all of you as well, and to Wendy. And to everyone who joined us over the live stream, thank you for your patience with the running to start. And we've ended on time, so thank you. And hopefully you get to your next venue where you're meant to be within time. And thank you so much again to our panelists. I've really appreciated the insightful conversation. Let's go forth, be merry, continue amplifying these key messages, and we'll see you in the venue over the next couple of days. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.